Cancel your wedding. My grandmother's voice came from directly behind me. I turned so fast that the handwritten vows slipped from my fingers and landed beside my white satin shoes. The bridal suite was empty. I was 34 years old, standing in front of an antique mirror at the Hawthorne Hotel, less than an hour away from marrying Daniel Hart. Through the tall windows, I could see guests gathering beneath strings of gold lights and white roses. Somewhere below, a quartet was rehearsing the song I had chosen for my walk down the aisle. But all I could hear was Grandma Rose. Cancel your wedding. She had been dead for 11 months. I gripped the edge of the dressing table and stared at my reflection. My face looked pale beneath the careful makeup. Rose's pearl earrings rested against my neck. She had worn them at her own wedding, and I had chosen them because I wanted a part of her beside me. It's stress, I whispered. That's all. Then the clasp of my left earring snapped. The pearl dropped into my palm, followed by something heavier. A tiny brass key. I stood completely still. The pearl's backing was hollow. Folded inside it was a narrow piece of yellowed paper with an address written in Rose's handwriting. It belonged to Vivian Hart. Daniel's mother. That was when I understood this was not a memory created by grief. Rose had hidden the key for me to find on my wedding morning. If you have ever felt that someone you loved was trying to warn you, even when everyone else told you that you were overthinking, tell me in the comments. And subscribe, because what I found behind Vivian Hart's front door changed everything I believed about my fiancé, my sister, and my own family. I called my maid of honor, Maya Torres. I need 20 minutes, I told her. Elena, the photographer, is looking for you. Please, keep everyone downstairs. Maya heard something in my voice and stopped asking questions. I slipped through the hotel's service hallway, gathered my dress above my ankles, and drove to Vivian's house with the key clenched inside my fist. She opened the door wearing a silver formal dress and pearl gray shoes. The moment she saw the key, all the color left her face. Where did you get that? From my grandmother's earring. Vivian closed her eyes. Then she looked at me and said, Rose promised me you would never marry Daniel without knowing the truth. Behind her, on the dining room table, sat a sealed banker's box. My grandmother's name was written across the lid. Underneath it was that day's date. Vivian stepped aside, but before she let me touch the box, she asked one question. Did Daniel ever tell you why he proposed 3 weeks after Rose changed her trust? Until that moment, I had believed my greatest problem was wedding day fear. I was wrong. To understand why I almost ignored the warning, you need to know the kind of daughter I had been trained to become. My mother, Patricia Mercer, cared deeply about appearances. She wanted our house clean, our clothes presentable, and our family problems hidden from anyone who might judge her. My younger sister Sophie was the charming one. She was impulsive, beautiful, and endlessly protected. When Sophie forgot something, she was overwhelmed. When I forgot something, I was irresponsible. Our father left when I was 12. After that, I learned to cook, balance household bills, help Sophie with homework, and avoid becoming another burden. My mother praised me when I was useful. You're my dependable girl, she would say. But whenever I needed comfort, her tone changed. Don't be dramatic, Elena. I already have enough to manage. Grandma Rose was different. She owned a lakeside cottage, several rental properties, and investments she had built with my grandfather. None of it made her flashy. She still wore old aprons, saved glass jars, and drove the same blue sedan for 15 years. She taught me how to read contracts, question unfair charges, and never sign anything I did not understand. More importantly, she made me feel safe. I eventually became an estate planning paralegal, but my family described my work as filing papers for lawyers. Meanwhile, Patricia proudly told everyone Sophie worked in luxury event planning, even though Sophie changed jobs often and regularly borrowed money. Daniel entered my life 2 years before our wedding. He was polished, patient, and careful with his words. He never laughed when I checked receipts or read agreements twice. He said he admired how responsible I was. My mother adored him immediately. Sophie flirted with him in the playful way everyone expected me to ignore. Daniel always smiled and called her harmless. Rose remained polite, but she watched him. Once, while we dried dishes at the cottage, she asked, Does Daniel love your peace, Elena, or does he love how easily you solve everyone's problems? I defended him. I told her she was being protective. A few weeks before she died, she held my hand and said, "People reveal themselves when they believe you have nowhere else to go." I thought she was talking about grief. Standing in Vivian's dining room on my wedding morning, staring at a box prepared by a dead woman who had loved me better than anyone alive, I finally wondered whether Rose had been warning me about something much older than Daniel. My whole life, I had mistaken being needed for being loved. And someone had built a plan around that mistake. The pattern had started long before Daniel. When Sophie was 23, she called me crying because she was 2 months behind on rent. She had spent most of her paycheck on a weekend trip with friends and assumed our mother would help. Patricia called me instead. "You're the stable one," she said. "You can recover from this faster than she can." I paid Sophie's rent. 6 months later, she damaged a rental car and had no insurance coverage. Patricia said the accident could ruin Sophie's credit before her career had even begun. I paid that bill too. Whenever I hesitated, my mother's voice became soft and disappointed. "I don't understand why helping your own sister feels like such a burden to you." The cruelty was rarely loud. That was what made it effective. Sophie knew I would fix contracts, review invoices, and rewrite vendor agreements for her event jobs. She called it sisterly support. She never offered to pay me. During Grandma Rose's final illness, I managed her prescriptions, appointments, insurance paperwork, and overnight care. Sophie visited with flowers, took photographs beside Rose's bed, and posted captions about cherishing every moment. Most visits lasted less than 20 minutes. At Rose's memorial, Patricia stood before the room and praised Sophie for bringing joy into her grandmother's final days. Then she thanked me for handling the paperwork. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something. He lowered his eyes. Later, in the parking lot, he touched my shoulder. "Your mother was grieving," he said. "Let it go." That sentence became his answer to almost everything. When he lent Sophie money from our joint wedding account without asking me, he said marriage required generosity. When Patricia invited business contacts to our wedding, but removed 2 of Rose's closest friends, he said changing the guest list would embarrass everyone. When Sophie took control of the flowers, venue layout, and head table seating, Daniel said she had professional experience and I should appreciate the help. Every objection I raised became evidence that I was difficult. The worst request came 3 months before the wedding. Sophie brought me financial papers for a new event company and asked me to sign a personal guarantee. I reviewed the numbers twice. The projected revenue was unrealistic, the debt was significant, and Sophie had contributed almost none of her own money. "I can't sign this," I said. Her face changed immediately. "You don't believe in me. This isn't about belief. It's a legal obligation." Patricia called Daniel before I even reached home. That evening, he sat across from me at our kitchen table. "It could change Sophie's life," he said. "It could also make me responsible for her debt." He sighed. "You always assume the worst." I remembered something Rose had once asked me. Had Daniel ever supported one of my boundaries when supporting it cost him anything? I searched through 2 years of memories. I could not find a single time. What my family did not know was that I understood far more about money and legal documents than they believed. For 7 years, I had worked for Margaret Lynn, one of the most respected estate attorneys in our county. She had trained me in trust administration and encouraged me to apply to evening law school. Rose trusted my judgment too. Before she died, she made me co-trustee of the Rose Mercer Family Trust alongside an independent fiduciary. The trust controlled her lakeside cottage, rental properties, investments, and charitable fund. The assets were not simply mine to spend. I had a legal duty to protect them. Patricia and Sophie believed Rose had handed me a private fortune. They spoke often about what would be fair once I became more generous. Daniel knew more than they did. Months earlier, he had seen trust correspondence on my desk. He claimed he had only moved the envelope while cleaning. Then I found a draft agreement connecting Sophie's new company to Daniel's financial advisory firm. The projections included a future capital contribution linked to my inheritance. Margaret read the document in silence. "This assumes either a personal investment from you or a loan secured against inherited property," she said. Daniel has never asked me for that. Not yet. After Rose's funeral, Margaret gave me a sealed letter my grandmother had left in her care. Rose explained that Patricia had pressured her to divide everything equally with Sophie despite Sophie's debts. She had refused. Then she wrote something that chilled me. Daniel had asked whether the lakeside cottage could be sold after we married. I did not confront him. I began saving emails, documenting withdrawals from the wedding account, and keeping copies of every financial document. When I mentioned a prenuptial agreement, Daniel looked wounded. Do you really want to begin our marriage by planning for its failure? I told myself he was hurt because he loved me. Still, I ordered a title search on the cottage. 3 weeks before the wedding, the results arrived. Daniel's firm had already prepared an unsigned loan proposal. The projected collateral was Rose's lakeside property, my property, and someone had prepared the paperwork as though my consent was only a formality they could collect later. Maya was the first person I showed the loan proposal to. We sat in a corner booth at a quiet diner 2 blocks from Margaret's office. Rain pressed against the windows, and the coffee between us had gone cold before either of us touched it. Maya read the document once. Then she read the internal notes attached to it. Elena, she said, pointing to the bottom of the page. Daniel's name is here. I know. This wasn't prepared by some employee who misunderstood a conversation. He was involved. It's still unsigned. That doesn't make the plan imaginary. I stared at the sugar packets arranged inside the metal holder. Even then, part of me wanted to defend him. Maybe Daniel had been exploring options. Maybe Sophie had exaggerated what I would contribute. Maybe the cottage had been listed only as an example. I had spent most of my life finding softer explanations for people who hurt me. Maya reached across the table. You don't have to prove he is a monster, she said. You only have to decide whether you trust him enough to marry him. That question frightened me more than the paperwork. If I postponed the wedding, Patricia would say I was dramatic. Sophie would say I was jealous of her business. Daniel would tell everyone my legal work had made me paranoid. I could already hear their voices. I had been trained to fear being called difficult, more than I feared being deceived. Margaret gave me the professional truth without softening it. The proposal cannot touch the cottage without your approval, she explained. The trust protects it, unless you transfer the property, guarantee a loan, or sign documents changing that protection. So they can't take it. Not unless you help them. She paused before continuing. Rose met privately with Vivian Hart several months before she died. I looked up. Daniel's mother? Margaret nodded. Vivian was frightened by something involving Daniel and Sophie. She would not give Rose a written statement, but Rose believed she knew more than she was admitting. Margaret opened a file and showed me a note in my grandmother's handwriting. If Elena proceeds with the marriage, Vivian must receive access to the document box. There was no explanation of what the box contained, only a reference to a key. Maya became my shield during the final wedding week. She kept copies of my identification, the trust papers, and the marriage license application in her own bag. She also began noticing how often Daniel asked about signatures. Have you completed the final license forms? He asked over breakfast. Later that evening, he asked whether I planned to bring my trust identification documents on the honeymoon. Each question sounded harmless by itself. Together, they felt rehearsed. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Maya stood in my apartment while my wedding dress hung from the bedroom door. Do you trust Daniel? She asked. I love him. That wasn't my question. I could not answer. She studied my face. Are you marrying him because you believe him? Or because canceling would force you to admit that everyone you love has been using you? The next week moved with the speed of something already out of my control. Sophie treated the Hawthorne Hotel like a showcase for her new event company. She invited a promotional photographer without asking me, and arranged branded cards beside the floral displays. When I objected, Patricia looked embarrassed. Sophie has worked too hard for you to become territorial now. It's my wedding, and she made it beautiful. Patricia also insisted Sophie sit at the head table. She made the whole day possible, she said. Daniel agreed. It's only a chair, Elena. Nothing was ever only what it was. 2 nights before the ceremony, Daniel placed a packet beside my dinner plate. Updated insurance information and honeymoon paperwork, he said. I read every page. Near the back was an authorization allowing his advisory firm to communicate with my financial institutions after we married. I'm not signing this. His expression tightened. It's routine. Margaret can review it. He leaned away from the table. Your job has made you suspicious of everything. My job has taught me to read before I sign. A marriage can't survive if every loving gesture needs approval from a lawyer. He spoke quietly, almost sadly. That was how Daniel applied pressure. He rarely raised his voice. He made resistance feel like cruelty. At the rehearsal dinner, Patricia stood beneath soft ballroom lights and lifted a champagne glass. To Daniel, she said, for finally teaching Elena how to belong to a family. Several guests laughed. My face burned. Sophie smiled across the table. And for having the patience to marry a woman who reads every line before signing. More laughter. Daniel touched my knee beneath the table, as if he were comforting me, but he said nothing. Vivian did not laugh. She sat at the far end of the table in a silver dress, avoiding her son's eyes. Before dessert, she walked behind my chair and pressed an old prayer card into my hand. It belonged to Rose. On the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, were 6 words. Trust the key, not the ceremony. I tried calling Vivian from the hotel room later that night. Daniel entered before she answered. He saw the card in my hand. My mother has been confused since Dad died, he said. He took it from me and dropped it into the trash. I waited until he left for the lobby bar. Then I retrieved it. On the wedding morning, Patricia told me not to ruin everything Sophie had arranged. Daniel texted twice about the marriage license envelope. Then Sophie entered the bridal suite and asked, "Did you bring the trust identification documents for the honeymoon bank appointment?" I stared at her. What bank appointment? Her smile disappeared. Before she could answer, Maya called her into the hallway. I turned toward the antique mirror. That was when I heard Rose's voice. Cancel your wedding. The pearl broke. The hidden key fell into my palm. 20 minutes later, I was driving away from the Hawthorne Hotel while more than 100 guests took their seats. Behind me, the ceremony countdown continued. Ahead of me waited Daniel's mother, and whatever truth my grandmother had died protecting. Vivian opened the front door before I reached the porch. She was still wearing the silver dress from the wedding preparations, but her shoes were gone. One hand gripped the doorframe, as if she had been waiting there for hours. When she saw the brass key in my palm, her face collapsed. Rose said you would come if she couldn't stop this herself. She led me into a formal dining room that smelled faintly of coffee and furniture polish. A banker's box sat in the center of the table, beside a cold cup and a stack of unopened wedding cards. My grandmother's name was written across the lid. Vivian sat across from me. I need you to understand that I am not telling you this because I am brave, she said. I should have told you months ago. Tell me now. She unlocked the box. Inside were printed emails, financial drafts, photographs of text messages, and handwritten notes in Rose's careful script. The first email was between Daniel and Sophie. Sophie wrote that her event company could not launch without real backing. Daniel replied that the money would come after the wedding, once I stopped treating the trust like sacred property. My hands went cold. Vivian explained that their relationship had started as a financial partnership. Sophie needed capital. Daniel wanted to expand his advisory practice and believed access to my trust would make both plans possible. Then the messages became more personal. There were private dinners I had never heard about, deleted conversations, and jokes about how easily I could be pressured. One message from Daniel read, "Elena is responsible enough to sign, but too loyal to leave." I read it twice. The sentence hurt more than any accusation could have. He had not misunderstood my loyalty. He had studied it. Vivian lowered her eyes. I heard him say that in this house. And you said nothing? I confronted him. He told me Sophie was helping with business projections and that you knew. I didn't. I know that now. She showed me another email, written 3 weeks after Rose changed the trust. Daniel told Sophie they needed to move quickly before Margaret influenced me further. Their plan was simple. During the honeymoon, I would be presented with a marital property agreement, a business guarantee, and loan documents. Patricia would tell me Sophie's future depended on me. Daniel would frame the signatures as proof that I trusted my new husband. Vivian's voice shook. Rose caught Daniel photographing trust correspondence at your grandmother's cottage. She confronted him. He accused her of trying to keep you alone and afraid. Vivian had defended her son. Then she found the deleted messages on a shared family tablet. She took them to Rose, but she refused to make a formal statement. She feared destroying Daniel's career, and believed she could persuade him to stop. Rose had given her until the wedding day. "One final chance," Vivian whispered, "to choose your safety over his reputation." My phone vibrated across the table. Patricia had left 4 messages. In the newest one, she said, "Elena, return immediately. Do not humiliate this family, because you are having doubts." Daniel's message was softer. "Whatever you think you found, come back. We can handle it privately." Privately. That was where they had always placed the truth, when it threatened their comfort. I photographed every page. Then I called Margaret. Before she arrived, Vivian pulled one final document from the box. It was a lender presentation. Daniel and Sophie had listed themselves as the future operating partners of Rose's lakeside cottage property. Not borrowers, not advisors, future co-owners. Margaret arrived 25 minutes later, carrying a portable scanner and a leather file case. She reviewed the emails, checked the metadata visible on the printed copies, and compared the lender proposal with the document I had already found. "These materials need a full review," she said, "but the immediate issue is clear. Can they take the cottage? No. You never signed anything, and the property remains protected by the trust." I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. "But," she continued, "representing expected control over property they do not own may create serious professional and civil consequences." Maya called from the hotel. Her voice was low. "Daniel told everyone you had a panic attack. Your mother is keeping the guests seated. Sophie says she can talk you back into being reasonable." I closed my eyes. Even while I was gone, they were rewriting me. Maya had secured the original marriage license envelope. Daniel had already tried to collect it from the bridal suite. Nothing had been signed, no ceremony had taken place. Legally, there was no marriage to undo. "I'm going back," I said. Vivian stared at me. "To marry him?" "No." Margaret warned me not to accuse anyone publicly of crimes before the evidence had been properly examined. We made a controlled plan. I would state only what the documents proved. I would refuse the marriage license. I would return Daniel's ring. Vivian agreed to confirm where the emails came from. I did not change out of my wedding dress. I left the veil in Vivian's dining room, but I kept Rose's remaining pearl earring on. The broken one stayed inside my closed hand. Before we left, I opened Rose's final sealed letter. Her message was short. "Love should never require you to become less informed, less protected, or less free. If I cannot stand beside you, let the truth stand there instead." I pressed the letter to my chest. Then I returned to the Hawthorne Hotel. As I entered the side corridor, I heard Daniel speaking through the ballroom doors. "Elena will be back as soon as she gets herself under control." I looked at Maya, then I reached for the handle. I was under control. That was exactly why their wedding was about to end. I opened the ballroom doors before Daniel finished his sentence. The string quartet stopped first. Then the conversations faded. More than 100 guests turned toward me. For one suspended second, relief passed across their faces. They thought the bride had returned. They thought the delay was over and the ceremony could begin. Daniel stepped down from the altar, wearing the patient smile he used whenever he wanted other people to see him as the reasonable one. "There you are," he said softly. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. His smile remained, but his eyes changed. Patricia rushed toward me from the first row. "Everyone has been waiting," she whispered. "Whatever happened, we can discuss it after the ceremony." Behind her, Sophie stood near the altar holding my bouquet. She looked less like my sister than a substitute bride waiting for instructions. "Elena," Daniel said, still performing calmness for the room, "you're overwhelmed. Let's go somewhere private." No, the word was quiet. It carried through the silence anyway. I walked toward the officiant and asked for the microphone. His eyes moved from me to Daniel, then back again. After a moment, he handed it over. I faced the guests. "My name is Elena Mercer," I said. "I know many of you traveled a long way to attend this wedding. I am sorry for the delay, But there will not be a marriage today. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Daniel approached from behind me. Elena, please don't do this while you're emotional. I turned toward him. I am not canceling because I am emotional. I am canceling because you attempted to involve property held by my grandmother's trust in financial plans I never approved. The room became completely still. Daniel gave a small, confused laugh. That is not what happened. There were preliminary business projections, nothing binding. I agree. They were not binding because I never signed them. Margaret entered through the side aisle carrying a slim folder. Vivian followed her. Sophie's face drained of color. Margaret placed copies of the lender proposal into the hands of Daniel, Sophie, Patricia, and Vivian. She did not distribute them to the entire room. This was not entertainment. It was evidence. Daniel glanced down at the first page. His jaw tightened. This document was exploratory. It listed Rose's cottage as projected collateral, I said. It also described you and Sophie as future operating partners. Sophie stepped forward. I never said I owned anything. Vivian looked at her. The emails say otherwise. Daniel turned sharply toward his mother. Vivian's hands were trembling, but her voice was clear. I recovered the messages from our shared family tablet. I gave copies to Rose. I should have warned Elena sooner. Mom, stop. No, Vivian said. I have spent too long protecting your reputation from the truth. A woman seated near the aisle covered her mouth. Someone farther back whispered Sophie's name. Daniel's expression shifted. The wounded fiancé disappeared, replaced by the financial advisor trying to rescue a failed negotiation. I was building a future for us, he said to me. Sophie's company could have benefited the entire family. The property would have remained yours. Then why didn't you ask me? He did not answer. Why did the plan require hidden messages, false ownership assumptions, and documents you wanted me to sign during our honeymoon? Patricia reached for my arm. Elena, this is paperwork. You are humiliating your sister and throwing away a costly wedding over paperwork. I looked at the woman who had spent my whole life teaching me to absorb whatever kept everyone else comfortable. You taught me that keeping the family comfortable mattered more than keeping me safe, I said. I am no longer accepting that lesson. Patricia released my arm. The silence that followed felt different from all the silences I had grown up inside. This one did not erase me. Maya walked forward, holding a cream-colored envelope. The marriage license, she said. She placed it in my hand. I lifted it so Daniel could see the unbroken seal. No ceremony has taken place. Nothing has been signed. There is no marriage. Daniel lowered his voice. Please. 5 minutes alone, you owe me that. No. Privacy is where you built this plan. I removed the ring from my finger and placed it in his palm. Any communication about our shared wedding expenses or property will go through counsel. Sophie shook her head. You're destroying everything because you never wanted me to succeed. Your success cannot depend on my signature, my property, or my silence. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Around us, the emotional balance of the room changed. Guests were no longer watching an unstable bride create a scene. They were watching Daniel and Sophie struggle to explain documents that had never required my knowledge. I faced the guests again. The reception meal has already been paid for. You are welcome to stay, eat, and spend time together. I will not ask anyone to choose sides, but I will not stand at this altar and enter a marriage built on deception. Near table 6, a gray-haired man stood. I recognized him as one of the investors Sophie had invited to impress. He looked directly at her. I would like to review those projections before our next funding meeting. Sophie's shoulders dropped. Daniel finally understood that canceling the wedding was only the first consequence. By Monday morning, Sophie's investor had frozen negotiations. Her company did not disappear overnight, but its launch was postponed. Vendors who had extended generous terms began requiring full deposits. People who had accepted her confidence as proof now wanted documentation. Daniel's advisory firm opened an internal compliance investigation after learning its branding had appeared on a proposal containing unsupported collateral assumptions. He was placed on administrative leave. There were no police waiting outside the hotel, no instant courtroom victory. The damage was quieter and more realistic. Clients asked questions. Compliance officers requested emails. Colleagues stopped returning casual calls. Patricia tried to control the story. She told relatives I had misunderstood an ambitious family plan and suffered a breakdown before the ceremony. But too many guests had heard Vivian. Too many people had seen the proposal. For once, my mother could not edit the truth before it reached the room. Margaret helped freeze the joint wedding account before anyone could remove more money. Daniel's family covered the contracts they had signed. I paid only the obligations legally tied to me. Vivian turned over the shared tablet and gave a formal statement. Daniel accused her of betraying him. She answered, "Protecting you from consequences helped you become the man who stood at that altar." Sophie sent me 17 messages blaming me for destroying her future. I read only the first 3. Her future had been built on property she never owned. That night I sat on Maya's couch wearing borrowed sweatpants while my wedding hairstyle remained pinned perfectly in place. I felt grief. I felt humiliation. I felt relief so deep it frightened me. The next morning, someone pounded on Maya's door. Patricia stood outside holding my overnight bag. She had not come to apologize. She had come to demand that I withdraw my statement before Daniel and Sophie lost everything. Patricia pushed past me before I invited her inside. She placed my overnight bag beside Maya's coffee table and looked at my borrowed clothes, my untouched breakfast, and the wedding pins still holding my hair in place. "This has gone far enough," she said. "You need to call Margaret and withdraw whatever statement you made." I told the truth. Daniel made a mistake because he was under pressure. Sophie was desperate. Neither of them intended to hurt you. She said it as though intention erased preparation. Then she used Rose. "Your grandmother would never want this family divided." For years, that sentence would have worked. I would have heard responsibility instead of manipulation. This time, I heard the demand beneath it. Patricia wanted the injured person to carry the consequences so everyone else could remain comfortable. "Rose protected the trust because she knew this could happen," I said. My mother's expression hardened. "So now you think you're better than us?" "No. I think I'm responsible for deciding who has access to me." I gave her 3 boundaries. She was not to contact Margaret, Vivian, or the lender in my name. Sophie could communicate with me only in writing about wedding property. Daniel had to use attorneys for all financial matters and could not come to my home or workplace. Patricia stared at me. "You've become cold." Distance feels cold when someone is used to entering your life without permission. She left without hugging me. Daniel sent a long apology that afternoon. He admitted hiding the financial plan, but insisted he had been trying to build our future. I replied once, "A future created without my informed consent was never ours." Sophie began with angry messages. Then came crying voice notes, old childhood photographs, and reminders of everything we had survived together. I blocked her temporarily. In therapy, I began learning why guilt still felt like responsibility. Vivian asked for nothing. She mailed Rose's banker's box to me with a short note. "Late honesty does not erase earlier silence. I understand if you never trust me." I allowed cautious contact, but I did not turn her into the mother I wished Patricia had been. My mother continued telling relatives the wedding had ended because of financial confusion. Eventually, I stopped correcting every person who believed her. Truth did not become less true because she renamed it. Several months later, I drove to Rose's lakeside cottage alone. The brass key opened the front door. Inside, the kitchen still smelled faintly of cedar cabinets and the lavender soap Rose kept beside the sink. Her faded apron hung behind the pantry door. For the first time since her death, I cried without trying to remain useful to anyone. That key had not merely led me to evidence. It had opened a life no one else controlled. 1 year later, I was living part-time at the restored cottage. I repaired the porch, preserved Rose's kitchen, and turned the smallest bedroom into a study for law school. I continued working with Margaret, while taking evening courses in elder law and trust protection. Maya became family, in the truest sense. We spent holidays with friends who did not measure love by how much pain someone was willing to absorb. Daniel eventually resigned from his firm after the compliance investigation damaged his position. No unauthorized transfer had occurred, so there was no dramatic criminal case. But his reputation suffered, because professional trust is difficult to rebuild once hidden plans become documented facts. His final letter admitted that he had treated my caution as an obstacle instead of a right. I read it. I did not reply. Sophie rebuilt her company on a smaller scale with independent funding and strict financial oversight. Months later, she sent an apology that named what she had done without blaming Daniel, Patricia, or pressure. I did not forgive her immediately. I told her that future contact would depend on consistent behavior, not one emotional letter. Patricia remained resistant. I met her twice in public places. Both times she minimized the wedding. Both times I ended the conversation. Being my mother no longer gave her automatic access to me. Vivian occasionally visited the cottage. Our relationship remained careful and imperfect. We spoke about Rose, regret, and the damage caused by protecting appearances longer than people. On the anniversary of the cancelled wedding, I stood on the dock at sunset, wearing Rose's repaired pearl earrings. For a long time, I believed her warning had saved me through something supernatural. Maybe part of it had, but Rose had also saved me through preparation, documents, witnesses, and the courage to leave behind a path toward the truth. Canceling the wedding felt like losing my future. It became the first decision that truly gave me one. If you have ever mistaken pressure for love or guilt for responsibility, share your experience in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about choosing dignity, truth, and peace over fear. I never walked down that aisle, but for the first time in my life, I walked toward myself.